Julian Council from On Panthers joining us to talk about the Panthers' 24-16 home loss against the Steelers. Julian, the Panthers came in wanting to protect the bank, but Pittsburgh came in and robbed the bank, and all we saw was those towels whipping around the stadium.
Did they rob the bank? Because it felt like it was a home bank.
With those towels, yeah.
Yeah, it's a common occurrence here in Carolina recently, unfortunately, and throughout the history of this organization as far as Steeler fans taking over that stadium. And, yeah, Steve Wilks preached all week long about protecting the bank. Last week, going into that Seattle game, was about doing something they hadn't done all season long, which was win on the road, win back-to-back games, and they were able to accomplish that. So there's finally good feelings heading into this week. The Panthers were playing in a meaningful December football game, knowing that if they won against Pittsburgh, then the final 3 games of the season against Detroit, at Tampa, at New Orleans, that they would be NFC South champions for the first time since 2015. And all that on the table, they lose to a Pittsburgh Steelers team that lost a heartbreaker last week to Baltimore, had essentially nothing to play for other than pride and trying to preserve Mike Tomlin's over 500 record as the Steelers head coach, as he's never had a losing season. So a disappointing effort from Carolina, but we've been here long enough. We've seen this team, so it's not all that surprising that it happened considering who the Panthers are and have been over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, and it guaranteed that the Panthers will have a losing record for the 5th straight season. 8-9 is still in play, and so are the playoffs somehow. We'll get to that. But, I mean, some games you don't even have to watch. You can look at the box sheet and see what happened. What happened in the ground game, both sides for Carolina?
They couldn't run the ball. They had 16 carries, 21 yards. 1.3 yards per carry by math is correct.
223-yard performance.
Right, after absolutely dominating, which is Seattle is second to last in the NFL stopping the run. So last week was not surprising at all. Pittsburgh was the worst rush defense in the league a year ago. They've been much better this year. They were top 10 at one point in the season, but they gave up like about 230 yards last week to the Ravens. So you're expecting Carolina with that momentum and knowing what the formula was to win, that they would be able to do that. And it was not a surprise that Pittsburgh stacked the box, but for Carolina to not have any sort of success at all on the ground, and then on the other side to lose that battle on the line of scrimmage with their defensive line, that's been spectacular recently, giving up 157 yards rushing. That's not great, but worst of all, Pittsburgh was 12 of 16 on third down. And the Panthers, that's been a bugaboo for them offensively all year long, and they actually weren't too bad on third down today. But 12 of 16, and the Panthers only had 12 first downs total. So that's not great when you're giving up that many on third down. That's as many as you had in a game. So it's really simple. They couldn't stop the run, couldn't get off the field, and couldn't run the football. All those 3 things together equals an L.
J.C. Horn can't cover 2 men at the same time. Whoever J.C. Horn was not covering, whether in the first half it was George Pickens or in the second half it was D'Onta Johnson, they got the ball and they went off and they moved the sticks.
Yeah, I know fans are going to be frustrated with the performance of Keith Taylor, but let's be honest, Keith Taylor is not supposed to be in this situation, and the Panthers' depth or really lack thereof in the secondary at this point in time in the season has really hurt them, with Dante Jackson out for the season for the 2nd year in a row, and also having injuries with C.J. Henderson, who seemingly in and out of the lineup. Even when he's out there, he's struggled. Steve Wilks, the interim head coach, has called out C.J. Henderson in the past, and he said Keith Taylor's got to make plays. So Keith Taylor's your 4th-string corner out there. And if it's not him, it's T.J. Carey, who gave him a touchdown last week to DK Metcalf when J.C. Horn wasn't lined up on him. So the Panthers certainly are in a situation where, with the depleted secondary, relying on 4th and 5th-string guys, that's going to come with players like D'Onta Johnson who can make plays and George Pickens. So it's not a surprise. It's just a byproduct of just the attrition of the season and not having some of your top guys there late, especially in the secondary.
The last home game right after it against the Broncos, that big win, Steve Wilks made no bones about it. Sam Darnold was going to start in Seattle.
Yeah.
Asked if Sam Darnold would be the starter next week against Detroit, Steve Wilks said everybody is going to be evaluated. What did you see from Sam? He didn't have the turnover. He got sacked 4 times. How much of that was the offensive line? How much of that was Darnold holding onto the football?
Well, I certainly look at one of them, Alex Highsmith, the Charlotte 49er, who beat Ickey pretty easily. That feels like that was Ike Ekwuanu's 2nd week in a row. He's given up a sack after having a really great streak of doing well. Also, the next play, Cam Hayward pretty much mauled Bradley Bozeman, who also has been really good on this offensive line for the Panthers. The offensive line as a whole has been great. This certainly was their worst game of the season. So I can point to those 2. I know TJ Watt got one. Maybe Sam could have got rid of the football quicker, and Taylor Moton getting beat on that. You got to go back and watch the film. It's never only a quarterback stat or an offensive line stat that can kind of be married together. But I thought overall Sam was good enough to win today. 14 of 23, 225 yards, a touchdown. He's played well enough over the last couple weeks for this team to be in a position to win the football game. but you need a running game to really complement, his inabilities he has in the passing game. Because Pittsburgh came out and said, we want that guy to beat us. And Sam got off to a hot start. But over 4 quarters, as we've seen, he's just not going to be good enough to lead this Panthers offense. But by no means am I blaming Sam Darnold for the loss today, because he certainly did his job. The offensive line just didn't play well enough. And, of course, the running backs like D'Onta Foreman, Chuba Hubbard, just didn't get enough out of them in the run game either.
Well, way to go Bengals, because they still kept this in Carolina's control, right? I mean, 3 games left. You didn't lose any momentum in the standings anyway. You're right where you were, game behind the Bucs, 3 games to go, one of those games in Tampa. I mean, do you think this team has it in them to still, stay in the driver's seat and win out?
Well, I never felt like they were going to win their final 4 games. I did think Pittsburgh would have been the most likely because of Pittsburgh coming in with a negative 166 point differential, which is, at this point in time, you can kind of tell who's good and who's not. Like, look at the Vikings.
Yeah.
Like, they're, 11-win team, and they're only +2, so they're really not that great. That is a pretty good indicator of who the better teams in the NFL are and who the average team and the bad teams are so far. So this is a game I thought they would win, and next Saturday coming up against Detroit, that was the one I was pointing to. I was like, okay, Lions, they win in New York against the Jets. They're firmly in the division race. We'll see what happens in Sunday Night Football as well with Washington and New York, because that's going to play in. I would think that Detroit was going to be the loss of the Final Four if you're going to lose one. Like, you could go 3-1 as long as the Panthers were able to beat 2 divisional opponents at Tampa and at New Orleans. So they're still alive. I don't know how confident you can feel after today, knowing that teams are going to see what Pittsburgh did and seeing that the Panthers, they cannot beat you if they cannot run the football and if they cannot stop the run. If they really don't, I guess, simply win the battle at the line of scrimmage, which Steve Wilks has talked about, it all starts up front. So next week's going to be tough, because that's a really good offense in Detroit. And they went to New York against the Jets, beat them. The Jets have a great defense. I think a defense a little bit better than Carolina's. So the Panthers are going to have to make plays next week. They certainly have to be much better against the pass. It can't just be J.C. Horn getting a stop, because there's a lot of great receivers who can make plays there in Detroit. So that's going to be a tough one, of course, on the road against 2 divisional opponents who, like New Orleans, they won. They're tied with Carolina. They can also find a way somehow with Andy Dalton to win a division. So 3 difficult games in the season. We'll see what happens, but I don't know if you come off of today feeling that confident.
Last week, it was everybody talking about cut the tag off. Steve Wilks, and obviously there's a process, and they probably can't do that till mid-January. Did this loss do anything in your mind to take away from that at all, or is it kind of where it was last week?
It's still the same for me. At the end of the season, he'll be evaluated. Right now, he's 4-5. I know there's a lot of context, of course. The coaches that have left, whether Steve Wilks fired them or they left to go follow Matt Rule to Nebraska, trading Christian McCaffrey, which has worked out great for Christian. It's also worked for this offense as far as the run game, and also Robbie Anderson to a lesser extent, as he's done nothing in Arizona. There's been plenty of football adversity that they've had to deal with. I think Steve Wilks has done as good of a job and even better than anyone could have expected. I don't know if today's loss really should hurt that, because if they went out, they win a division. He's 7-5 over the 12 games he's been the head coach, would have won the division. Hard for me not to see him being the top candidate. Now, I still believe that David Tepper, no matter what happens the rest of the season, needs to cast a wide net and talk to as many coaches as possible to get this hire right. It's very important that he does that. And if he wants to hire Steve Wilks, that's great. But he still needs to talk to other people and make sure that Steve Wilks absolutely is that right guy. The one thing I will say, though, Nick, is you go back to that game in 2018, Thursday Night Football, when the Panthers played against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Of course, we know the history with David Tepper. Being, that basically ended Cam. But the history of Tepper being a minority owner there in Pittsburgh, being from Pittsburgh, and the embarrassment he got from that game. And I just wonder today, looking in that stadium, seeing all the terrible towels, which is nothing new if you've been around here in Charlotte for as long as I have and a lot of people have, but then also to lose that game against a team that really have anything to play for, it's so important for you to win that game. Does that stick with him? Does he maybe use that against Steve Wilks moving forward? I don't know, but I should think after the next 3 weeks we'll really have a better understanding of how things should play out after he goes through the process and we get an answer by the end of January.
I would hope not, because if you really dig into the context of that, a lot of those tickets were probably bought secondary market back when this team was 1-4 and in and around there before they started making this push.
I mean, only 2 weeks ago they were kind of out of it.
Come into play there.
Yeah.
All right, Julian Council, for your Christmas, folks, he is cranking out podcasts left and right this week on Locked On Panthers.